Ever wonder how bicycle and pedestrian routes and amenities are integrated into PennDOT's planning? My name is Tim Phelps, and I'm the Executive Director of TMACC. In this episode, we will gain insight to this process from three transportation professionals: Roy Gothie, the statewide bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for PennDOT; Fran Hanney, Senior Manager, Traffic Services Division for PennDOT District 6; and Joe Banks, the Assistant Manager of the Office of Pennsylvania Project Implementation for DVRPC and PennDOT. Thank you for taking time to listen in, and I now hand over the program to Roy Gothie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to get my screen shared here. Thank you for spending part of your Friday morning with me. I hope you are enjoying your coffee as much as I am. I was asked to talk today about active transportation in Pennsylvania and PennDOT's vision for that moving forward. And it was pretty obvious that right off the bat, I had to frame it in kind of the last year, because that's been the overwhelming story for all of us as we've had to adapt. And fortunately, I was able to be involved in PennDOT's work for planning post-COVID. Our secretary set up a group of internal and external stakeholders to talk about what trends we were seeing in the world of transportation and how they might impact operations, planning, and funding moving forward. And so I'm going to kind of frame the active transportation plan in those terms as we talk about it today. So we'll start with what is active transportation. For our plan, it's self-propelled, human-powered mode of transportation, walking or biking. And you all remember these days, maskless, in groups, to the cities, having a good time. And the important thing for this discussion with active transportation is to remember another word: micro-mobility. So rather than human-powered, we're thinking electrical-powered vehicles like e-scooters, e-bikes, and even the larger 500-pound last-mile delivery cargo bikes that Amazon and UPS are using in pilots across the United States. So there are a lot of different people and vehicles operating on trails, sidewalks, shoulders, and now even in spaces we've set aside on our roadway for more expansive use of active transportation. So there's a lot of moving pieces, so to speak. This picture kind of demonstrates where we are with active transportation in Pennsylvania. This is a trail in Lancaster County. The crossing is all right. The 4-year-old in the middle is designed to demonstrate just how much space is dedicated to the road versus the trail users. It's a little bit skewed. This one is an example from Johnstown that I thought was particularly indicative of a connected pedestrian network. The green line you see on the left is how people were crossing while I was at the site. Essentially, there is no signal there for pedestrians. There is no marked crosswalk. It's a mid-block crossing. They were scampering across the road, waiting on that concrete median, and then making the second half of the cross when it looked good. The red lines you see are the traffic engineered versions of where they should cross. 1, 2, 3, 4 crossings with signals. So 4, maybe 5 minutes to get across the road there. It's a little challenging, especially up in Johnstown, and the sidewalks and the ADA crossings are not maintained. It's hard to get across the street. You could see why people would cross through the middle of the intersection. And for me, this is a big concern because those mid-block crossings are where we have a lot of pedestrian crashes, especially in low light conditions, in the evenings. It's very hard to get across the street. So with all of that in mind, we had created the active transportation plan somewhere around 2018 to 2020. It was a process. And I was very excited in January to get this out on the road and start talking about it. I was able to do some of that despite the COVID restrictions, but as we all know, everything changed in March. The world went topsy-turvy. And it turned out that the themes in the active transportation plan were very, very important. And as we moved through the months of COVID-19, they became more obviously important. In particular, the connected walking and biking networks that people were using to get out of their houses and get some get some exercise, to relieve mental stress, and enjoy their community, the public health aspects of it, as well as the equity. Where were they able to go to get outside? How easy was it to access the stores? How easy was it to get to the parks? Things like that. And then obviously safety was the huge one for PennDOT. How did we work to improve safety for all of our roadway users when there were so many more people out on the trails and sidewalks? So what we saw in our post-COVID-19 planning was really that rapid shift to telework. I went from being in Montreal, Canada on Saturday to picking up my computer at central office in Harrisburg on Sunday to working from home on Monday morning. And immediately, a reduction in the number of people out on the roadway, reduced commuter and lower vehicle miles traveled. People were inside, somewhat sheltering in place, and essential workers were out doing the business they needed to do. We ended up with lower peak volumes over the course of the year, so that morning rush and that evening rush dropped. And one of the questions we're asking internally is, what does this mean for our 20-year traffic projections? When we think about what priority projects we have on the highway, can we do a road diet? Can we maintain a level of service? What do we want to think about with our 20-year model? Do we decrease the peak traffic? Do we not? No one knows yet. We're back up to 85% volume on most of our roadways, but that peak hour just hasn't reappeared because people are still working from home. I'm in Fulton County. Transit use plummeted. We all saw people abandoning transit as they worked from home, but also concerns over safety. That impacts what other options people who don't own a car have. Again, walking and biking. And then finally, because there were fewer vehicles on the road, nationally, there was an increase in aggressive driving and speeding, leading to some disturbing increases nationally in pedestrian injuries and fatalities. We also saw an increase in walking and biking when you didn't have anything you could do elsewhere that was socially distant and outside. You took a walk with your kids. It's overwhelmed our regional trail systems, our local trail systems, as well as the parks. I personally went outside the trail. We saw 100 people pass in one direction on the Pike to Bike Trail in my backyard, whereas in previous summers, if you saw 3 people and a rattlesnake, you're doing pretty well. Community health and recreation, commuting, these things all became critical aspects of outdoor activity. The parks were struggling because we were working from home, so maintenance, removal of trash were challenging. We saw more users on the trails, so we started to hear concerns about speeding, about multiple different types of vehicles operating without a whole lot of common sense behind their operations. And it became a challenge for education, especially when we were trying to get that 6-foot social distance messaging out there. The e-scooters and non-traditional devices increased. The unibalance wheels, the e-powered skateboards, the e-powered roller skates, all of them appeared on our trails. And what we saw was an inadequate width and connectivity of sidewalks and trail networks for the general public, something that those of us in the field knew about, but the general public were not necessarily aware of because they didn't need to get out and use them every day. They could drive. Driving was convenient and easy. It particularly emphasized issues long raised by the disability community. So the lack of ADA curb ramps, the countdown timers, the beg buttons, the call buttons you have to activate by hand to get the signal to cross the street became a challenge because no one wanted to touch them. So we saw pretty quickly that the network that hadn't worked very well before worked even less. We traveled a lot more to go to trails, and the Pennsylvania Environmental Council has a report. You can see the link there below. Like 100 to 200% increase in trail usage year to year. It was just amazing. Their graph here shows it from 2018 to 2020. That's a significant number of people using trails and trying to social distance. We also saw bike sales go up. E-bikes went up 145% in 2020, And sales of all bikes were up 65% because people wanted to get out and be active. So the bike in the garage didn't work. Maybe they had to buy a new bike. Bike shops, you couldn't get things fixed for love nor money. The sales for other pieces, indoor bikes, helmets, and accessories grew to $1 billion, 75% increase year to year. And even the ride share, the scooter share and the bike share increased. This particular post from City Bikes in New York City showed 42 million miles ridden. They added 3,700 new e-bikes because the e-bikes are getting rides at 3-to-1 ratios over regular bikes, and people are taking them for longer rides. It seemed to be the preferred vehicle of choice. DCNR noted that all recreational outdoor equipment was up over the year. It really spiked, and you can see that. Bikes, playground equipment, birding supplies, everything. In the course of this year, DCNR updated their statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. They had to pivot a little bit, do a lot of external work via Zoom like the rest of us, but it was very important for them to recognize the critical role that trails play in our active transportation. This is from the Secretary in the introduction to the document, which should be available online this week. By helping us to explore nature and our communities, the Trails of Pennsylvania were there to help us get through a year full of unknown surprises, firsts, and changes. And the goal is a trail within 10 minutes of every citizen. And that's a very ambitious goal. We saw how difficult it was to get to trails if you didn't have a car, how difficult some of our remote places were. And even those were overwhelmed by people who did have access. So walking and biking were critical and will continue to be critical. Circling back to our active transportation plan now, this is an example of how walk sheds for children have shrunken over the years, 1919 to 2016. This example is obviously in England, but I think it proves the point. The great-grandfather at age 8 walked 6 miles to go fishing. The grandfather in 1950 walked about a mile down to the woods to play. The mother back in 1979, which doesn't seem so far away to me, was a half mile to the swimming pool, and the son now walks 300 yards to the edge of the street on which he lives. So that's quite a change. And I think you can imagine that it's land use and motor vehicles which have contributed to that fragmentation of the transportation network for people who aren't using motor vehicles. And for those of you who like math, 300 yards is about 2.8% of the 6 miles. We also note that interested but concerned cyclists are a group who got out on the roads and trails a lot more. They're not comfortable necessarily in bike lanes, but will bike on sidewalks if bike lanes are provided, simply because they don't like being adjacent to traffic. And when these groups got out on the road in Pennsylvania in 2020, they recognized that the network didn't necessarily suit their needs. And so we saw requests for trails go up. We saw people commuting on bikes because they had to. More people became had-to cyclists. It was interesting to see that. And because we were aware of these changes, even back in 2017, our vision for the active transportation plan highlighted biking and walking are integral elements of our transportation system that contribute to community health, economic mobility, and quality of life. And I think we all saw that over this past year. So quickly to go through our themes that we pulled out. And these are from the surveys we did, as well as talking to our stakeholders, the MPOs and planning partners. We really needed an increase at PennDOT to plan, design, construct, and maintain active transportation facilities that support and encourage users of all ages and abilities. And we saw that need highlighted. We've developed a district planner in every single PennDOT district to help us do that coordination. We wanted to improve our processes. So we are updating manuals and documents so we can better develop designs that meet the needs of the communities we're in. We're supporting legislation that protects vulnerable roadway users, that allows for parking separated bike lanes. and we're talking to the providers of the new mobility devices, the e-scooters in particular, but different kinds of e-bikes as well. We're looking at equity. We're supporting the work of our planning partners who are doing equity mapping. We did a little bit of that in the active transportation plan to improve non-motorized access to transit and other modal connections for people who don't have motor vehicles. And we wanted to do ongoing outreach and education through our local technical assistance program, which you can find online on PennDOT's website. We do free trainings for local governments on marking crosswalks, on trail crossings, on setting speeds, on addressing curb and line of sight issues. It's really, really useful, and a lot of it is recorded as well, so you can see it, not necessarily having to participate. The connected networks, this is the active transportation plans at the local level. Where is your network? Where are your gaps? PennDOT has been working with the Department of Health and DCNR to support the development of 7 to 9 active transportation plans a year through CDC grant funds. We also have funding available through our MPO and RPO partners to do specific studies on walking and biking. And our District 1 finally completed first official district bicycle plan from a PennDOT perspective. So we've actually reached into that realm ourselves. And then finally, coordinating with parks, trails, and recreational amenity access with DCNR, we developed our plans hand in glove so that our priorities, our goals, and our strategies overlap each other in a way that gets us to where we need to be. Public health, this was one of the new pieces, one of the pieces I'm proudest of. We finally recognized the externalities that come with our planning and policy decisions in transportation, and we're trying to address some of those. So being able to get your 320 minutes of moderate exercise recommended by the CDC, benefits, reductions in stroke, heart attack, dementia, Alzheimer's, and depression all can be addressed through increased access to active transportation. We want to improve data collection so we have an idea of the kind of injuries we're seeing in crashes that aren't necessarily reported. So if you crash on a trail, you're not going to have that reported in PennDOT's crash statistics. We want to get our health policy practitioners involved in our MPOs and planning processes so that they can come in and talk about the issues with obesity and diabetes in their communities, talk about the inability to get to medical appointments and things like that. And we want to kind of think about how do we link our grant criteria to community projects that talk about strengthening health and active transportation. Economic mobility, this is a big one for me because we want to make sure that people can get to school and to work and to their medical appointments easily without a car. You'll note AARP says 77% of its members want to remain in place where they live in the community. They want to keep their own home. And as they age out of driving, they're still going to need to be able to access the community services around them. And that means walking or biking particularly. So that's important to us. And then access to job centers and downtown districts for communities all across the state. So what's next at PennDOT? Well, besides sharing the active transportation plan like I'm doing today, we have 3 things I wanted to talk about quickly. One is updated guidance on the design of bicycle facilities. So this is in PennDOT's design manual, and this is a great expansion on a very limited previous chapter, which basically talked about Mark 1, Mod 1 bike lanes. We are now talking about two-way contraflow bike lanes. We're talking about designing trails in a way that has more space for people that accommodates some of these other devices. It's much better. We expect it to see sometime early summer. That will be put out and we'll try to have a press release for it. It's a big change, a long time coming. We are instigating a mapping of all trail crossings on state roads. This is kind of that partnership with DCNR and making those connections in the local trail network. This way, through the PennDOT Connects process, when we're doing some of those resurfacing projects Fran is going to talk about, or more large capital scale projects, we'll be able to say, there's a trail crossing here. Let's talk to our planning partners and see what the conditions are there and what we need to do to improve that crossing for all roadway users. The pilot will be getting underway in District 4 in about a month, and we expect to have a working model complete by September. So all of our districts and our MPO planning partners can input the information on the trail crossings, on state roads, and hopefully local roads as well. So we have a real idea of what our needs are and we don't miss out on opportunities. Finally, we are developing a policy on trails and limited access, right? This has been 3 years in the making. And the idea is that oftentimes the easy gaps on trails are complete, and PennDOT has right of way, which has perhaps the best grade through a narrow pass with a river or a railroad and a mountain or all three. And we should at least have an opportunity for our partners to come to us and discuss, could we put a trail in here away from the roadway, separated by a fence that would make a critical connection between two communities? How do we do that? It's been informal and ad hoc in the past. We needed a policy that said, yes, you can come ask. Here's what you need to bring to the table. Here's what we expect in terms of maintenance and operations responsibilities. So look for that later this summer. And my contact information is below. Please feel free to reach out to me with questions about any of this. I'm happy to help. I can put you in touch with the districts if you need. And now I'll pass it over to Fran to talk a little bit about what's happening in District 6.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here on a Friday morning, especially as opposed to a Monday morning. Thank you, Roy. That was an excellent overview of PennDOT's goals and our recognition of transportation goes way beyond cars. We're a new PennDOT these days. We're not the same old PennDOT from 20 years ago when it was cars. So I want to talk a little bit today about our PennDOT Connects program. This was a program conceived by former Secretary Leslie Richards and followed through by our current Secretary Yasmin Gramian, and supported by all the districts and helped administered by Roy out of central office. PennDOT Connects is essentially a program that recognizes that there are community connections, community linkages, both pedestrian, bicyclists, other types of linkages that perhaps we can incorporate into some of our programs, okay? The main one that I'm dealing with is part of our surface treatment program. When we go ahead and we repave a road, well, we have to restripe that road. And we recognize that there may be opportunities to implement facilities such as bike lanes, share the road type signs, buffered bike lanes, those types of things. Before I get fully into that, the other part of PennDOT Connects is relates to our capital programs, where we have larger projects with bigger scopes. We want to engage with communities and ask them, hey, there's a missing, 300-foot section of sidewalk here. We're widening the road and improving this intersection right next to it. Would you be interested in having us go ahead and make that sidewalk connection, because it appears that we have to acquire the right of way anyway for roadway reasons? And if you're willing to go ahead and accept the responsibility of ownership of that sidewalk, we're willing to build it for you at no cost as part of our construction project. So that's just a generic example of something that PennDOT Connects does. So getting back to the surface treatment portion of this, we, PennDOT, at least in District 6, we've developed a 5-year paving program where we go ahead and we look at all of our assets, our roadways, if you will, and we assess, okay, which roads are coming up for pavement, which are the worst ones. Let's start working down that list. Let's project that out for 5 years and put a plan together. That's kind of a recent innovation. We didn't always plan that far ahead. We always planned a year or two out, but more recently we're going 5 years. What that allows us to do is work with our regional and county partners. Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission takes a look at that list, and they do a large screening of that list, And I'm going to share my screen now so I can show you what that looks like. Okay. All right, what you see on this screen here, this is the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission's master list of all the roads that we are going to pave over the next 5 years that are on the plan. Now, mind you, that plan does get updated yearly. So, sometimes certain roads become a higher priority while other roads become a lesser priority for, a variety of reasons. But, it's the best planning model that we have. So, DVRPC takes a look at this and they compare these roads with county plans, county bike plans, things like that. Are these roads identified on a county map as a major bike route or a proposed bike route? Do they link parks with communities, parks with downtowns, schools with housing developments? All those types of logical things. This is just Chester County. So over the next 5 years, we're going to look at all of these locations in Chester County for possible bike lane implementation. And some may make it on the list and some may not. It all depends on the roadway conditions. For example, do we have room for a bike facility? What is the ADT of that road? What is the accident history? What are the geometric challenges? Can we fit the facility in? Is the ADT so high that really we should be looking at some sort of buffered bike lane? And is there room for that? Or conversely, is the ADT so low that even though there's no shoulder, the road is suitable, or as Roy had identified in his presentation, low stress enough that we could put in share the road signs, or sharrows, as we commonly like to call them. So that's the type of thing that we do when we're doing this. Now let me share another screen with you. That's DVRPC's tracking site. District 6, we have our own database that we use to track and evaluate all the roads that we have done. So we only just started doing this in 2019. And this is a list that shows all of the roads that we have either done or are in process right now within the 5-county southeastern Pennsylvania region. We have the various counties: Chester, Montgomery, Bucks, Delaware, and of course, Philadelphia. We identify the road segment, the municipalities that they're in, that sort of thing, the types of roads, the numbers. Is the township interested? Just various parameters that help us, figure out what's happening and where we're at in the process, making sure that we follow through on everything. Now, one thing I want to be clear about is we engage first with DVRPC, then they do an initial screening, then PennDOT does an initial screening, and yeah, I do a lot of that myself. I have another wonderful person working with me that we recently hired, who we dedicated full time to doing just this stuff. We also have a consultant assistance on board. So between us, we all do these screenings. We coordinate that back with DVRPC. Then we engage with the counties. The counties also, have their priorities and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of cross communication going on. Once we're comfortable with a roadway segment, we then go ahead and engage with the municipality and see what their interest is. Because, here's the deal. We will build it, but we're going to ask you to maintain it. Now, what is maintaining a bike lane for the time in between pavings? Well, let me show you what that looks like. Okay. This is what we're talking about here. This is a bike legend for a road. This costs roughly about $250, okay? And we're gonna go ahead and this is a sample bike plan that I'm showing you now on my screen that we've developed for one of the corridors that I forget where this one is exactly. Looks like this is Lansdowne and Yeadon Borough in Delaware County. We're gonna put these bike legends, every 500 feet or so. And they're going to go down along with the long lines. This is the corridor, Lansdowne Avenue. And this is what it looks like. You have, I know this is kind of small, and I apologize. These happen to be red lines. But there's a bike legend and arrows. PennDOT will maintain all of these long lines. We'll maintain those. What we're asking the municipalities to do is maintain these bike legends. That's, approximately a couple hundred feet distance between these bike legends. So there's not a ton of them. On average, PennDOT will repave a road once every 10 years, roughly speaking, depending on conditions, the road, the ADT, that sort of thing. So these legends tend to last potentially that whole time. Maybe they'll wear out once and you'll have to replace them once. PennDOT puts up the signs, once again, at our cost. We will engage with our sign folks in the counties. We'll install the signs. Legends will go down with the paving project. And maybe a sign gets knocked down every now and then. That happens. Once again, these signs are not super expensive propositions to replace. So really, it's a pretty good deal when you look at it in total. Right now, I want to give you an example of our methodology, and I think it fits in with everything that Roy said about healthy communities, linkages, making connections to parks, downtowns, neighborhoods. This is an example. This is in Bucks County, a town called Richboro in Northampton Township, and it's maybe 15 miles north of Philadelphia. Beautiful area. Mostly suburban, but as you can see, it's right on the edge of the rural area. This over here is Tyler State Park. It's a beautiful park, has wonderful bike trails, both paved, unpaved, multi-use trails. It's actively farmed, has a beautiful Neshaminy Creek running through it. Wonderful, wonderful asset. Over here, we have community athletic fields. Baseball fields, soccer fields, football fields, things like that. Here is the downtown, okay, of Richboro. And we're going to be repaving this road right here. This is 232. And we're going to be repaving this road right here. This is 332, Alms House Road, and this is Bustleton Pike. Okay. So we were tasked with taking a look. How could we install bike facilities here? Are the roads suitable? Are they wide enough? What's the ADT? What is the stress level for cyclists? Is it an appropriate place to put this? Well, what we found was the road between the center of town here and roughly in this area here was very suitable for bike lanes. It was wide enough. The speeds were low, somewhat higher ADT, but not crazy, not out of line. But where are we connecting to? Once we got north of there, the road got too narrow, and the ADT was just high enough that we were not comfortable putting sharrows down. So now we have to say, is it really worth it? Is it worth it making this connection? Well, what common knowledge has, local knowledge and experience, and this is what PennDOT engineers hopefully do. They get to know their areas. They get to know their roads. They understand where these connections are. Also, engaging with the counties, engaging with the municipalities, we can learn things where maybe we don't have the experience. Well, when you come up here, there's this little road called Twining Ford here. It's 25 miles an hour. It's a dead-end road. It's a little residential street, extremely low stress. And what do you know? Where does it go? It goes right to the park. So if I can get a bike facility from the center of town here where the shops are, where the restaurants are, businesses are, I can now connect via this road because I can put sharrows on this road. I can't put them out here, but out here I can put a bike lane. Now all of a sudden I've connected to the park. College Park Trail, there it is. I've connected this park all the way to this downtown center. Similarly, I take a look at Newtown Richboro Road here, this 332. And what I found is, yes, I have room. I can put a bike lane in, a full bike lane. I have plenty of room to do it between here, but then I only get to this intersection here. And then beyond that, the road isn't really wide enough. So, gee, is it really worth it? Well, I noticed these parks here. Okay. And can I get someone there? Well, guess where I cut off at? Right here at this intersection is where I can't keep going. But lo and behold, the community already has a sidewalk that goes and connects over to this park facility. So I can get the bikers to here. You see this wide shoulder here, wide shoulder here. I can get the bikes to here. Now at this point, the more adventurous bikers who don't mind the higher stress roads, they can continue on. That's fine. That's perfectly legal. But those lower stress bikers who aren't necessarily comfortable with that, but are wishing to access these facilities, they can dismount here and they can use this connection here to get to this park. So this is, I hope that gives you a flavor of how we do this, how the sausage is made, if you will. And most communities are welcoming of this. There's a few that haven't been so welcoming. I don't know if they fear the cost concerns or they just need more information. The one issue that we've come across is that we won't prepare these plans because it takes money and resources to prepare them until we're sure that a community really wants this, what we view as an asset. So sometimes that creates a bit of a dilemma. We want to see what you're giving us. Well, we want you to commit to what we're going to give you before we spend the money to create it. So in working with DVRPC and the counties, we've come up with an inventory of sample plans and things like that. And that's being developed further and further so we can do a better job in our community outreach and hopefully answer some of those questions, allay some of those fears, and make people more comfortable with accepting these things. I mean, the big thing to remember is, PennDOT, this is no cost to the community, other than maybe in a couple of years you might have to replace a few of these sharrows, a few signs, that sort of thing. But our overall goal is to create healthier communities, more connected communities, safer facilities for people. As Roy had highlighted in his picture there of the generations and their shrinking walk zone, we're hoping to increase the safe connectivity between communities, between parks, between schools, that sort of thing. One last thing I will say is I also do work on regular trails, trail crossings, that sort of thing. I work with the East Coast Greenway, the Highlands Trail, conservancy groups. There's just a plethora of organizations, bike coalitions that are interested in this kind of stuff. And the future is very exciting. We, as Roy noted, we are working on updating and improving our policies. PennDOT has evolved a lot in the last 20 years, and we continue to evolve to try to be more permissive of things while ensuring public safety. Lastly, I also happen to be the ADA coordinator, so it kind of works hand in hand, because I look at both bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So I believe this same approach is being repeated in the other districts, and I hope my message today is received that PennDOT is making an active effort to really improve connectivity, improve public health, and look beyond just cars. I thank you so much for your time today, and it's been a pleasure to try to give this presentation to you.
Thanks, Fran. Thanks, Roy. Really appreciate all the information you guys have shared today. I'd like to say, Roy, if you want help with some of the trail crossings, with working with Fran, let my boss Ryan and I know. We can kind of work with Marianne and whatnot to kind of get that stuff sorted for you, as we have lots of them throughout the region that we've worked on. I will give my pitch to the Transportation Alternative Set Aside Program. It's been a kind of a year in the making of waiting for the cycle to open. We're following the state schedule. The latest information we have is the guidance should be available mid-June, and the round should be open in July of this summer. I'd like to thank especially Chester County and some of the other counties, Montgomery and Delaware so far, have started to reach out through, specifically McMahon, it seems to be pretty aggressive with their municipalities in starting to have some early conversations in project development. So, we've already had a number of good conversations with the county planners and some engineers on trying to start to think about developing those potential projects into potentially being a TA set aside application. In our region, we require 1 hour meetings, or we provide 1 hour meetings before you should apply. And that's been a recent happening from the latest round that we went through. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there to let everyone know to reach out to me as the program coordinator for District 6 in the NPO. I'm going to share some broad strokes. I had a chance to talk with my boss, Ryan Gallagher, who worked on 2 very big trails within the region. And then I'm managing a handful of other ones kind of going, but a lot of the trails I'm focusing on to just share with you are cross-county trails or trails that are trunk trails that have some connection across the county line, and how working with the different partners have allowed these bigger connections to happen. So the first trail is the Schuylkill River Trail, which has been 10 plus years in the making. It's a fairly significant trail that connects into the 422 bridge, which, as Roy mentioned, was that limited access right-of-way situation. So Chester County has worked very hard to get this to where it is. According to Ryan, it seems like the construction should be finished sometime next summer. And the small piece I'll click on in Montgomery County should lag behind by about a 6-month period. So there'll be some sort of detours that we won't fully be able to get across that bridge right away. But that goal, once the Chester County section's built and Montgomery County finishes their section over the bridge to Industrial Highway, then that'll be that full connection of the SRT. So the next one is the Chester Valley Trail Extension in Montgomery County. This is through King of Prussia, Bridgeport, and Norristown, and again has a similar timeline. Sometime next summer that should be finished. This was again another long project in the making. Obviously you can see it has the crossover of 202 there. King of Prussia is very dense, so that's one of the big trail networks on one of our big trunk trails that's happening and should be open, like I said, next summer. Another one is the Newtown Rail Trail, talking with Bucks County. This looks to be open in the next 2 months. This is from Bristol Road down to the County Line Road. And as you'll kind of see, some of the work that's happening across counties, Montgomery County is able to make these connections. So you can see the green line down here, which is the Pennypack Trail. And Montgomery County has built this small section about 3/4 of a mile to get to County Line Road. So that connection is now happening. As I zoom out, you'll see regionally, this trail now will connect Bucks County up in Southampton all the way down through Montgomery into Philadelphia County, which is the Fox Chase Lorimer Trail, currently under design. And Montgomery County is going to build a couple of 100 feet of trail to connect to their existing trail. So that'll get you to the train station there in the Fox Chase neighborhood. And then additionally, if you go down Pennypack into Philadelphia, you'll eventually be able to get to the river itself into Pennypack Park on the Delaware. We're developing a small section, right here on State and Ron, which is an intersection crossing of State Road, which is, fairly large 4-lane highway. We're trying to make that safer, and that is currently in design as well. Both Fox Chase and State and Ron should probably be out to construction sometime next year to, again, extend these projects and also to make for safe connections. One of the other main projects we have is in Morrisville. It's the Bridge Street Crossing. It's one of DCNR's top 10 trail gaps. I've been in conversations with DCNR, Diane Krippis, quite often giving her updates on this. This is one of those state road trail crossings. It's on the D&L Canal Trail, and it's going to ramp up to Bridge Street, cross at mid-block on Bridge Street, and then kind of go back down. Currently, there are steps on the south side, but there is no access on the north side. So the folks that use the canal trail have to detour around. But as I zoom out, you'll see the miles upon miles of connection that this makes and will make within the D&L Canal Trail network. Another one that's under design, but it's going to be put onto the tip and have some construction funding that will be federal, is the second phase of the Chester Creek Trail in Delaware County. We'll connect to Creek Road down to Bridgewater Road. This section, which is phase 1, which is built and has been built for a couple of years, is a very, very popular trail in Delaware County. The parking lots are always full there. And this will be an extension to eventually get down to the city of Chester, to some of the trails that exist there. Working my way into Philadelphia, another soon-to-be funded trail will have a safer connection at the Wissahickon Transportation Center. So Kelly Drive and Ridge, if you're familiar, is pretty difficult. You have to kind of bike up and around on the sidewalk and then continue up Main Street here. This will go through the Wissahickon Transportation Center, behind the movie theater and some storage places, and then connect into the newly constructed Pencoid Bridge and into Montgomery County to kind of bypass the Main Street portion if you're not as comfortable being on road for that section until you can kind of get to the towpath. And a couple of more just to kind of share. The Parkside Kinwood Trail in Lower Merion is currently under design, working to extend that project to City Line Ave. And what should be funded soon is the Parkside Kinwood Trail in Philadelphia, which again will be a few years out to get to construction. However, that will connect to, and you don't see it here, but a protected cycle track from basically 53rd Street down to 40th and Girard. So in here is the Police Touch Museum and some other kind of aspects, and the zoo is over here. So there's a lot going on that will allow users to get to this section of West Philadelphia. And eventually there are connections to get down to the MLK project, which I won't talk about in too detail, but that is, I was out there this morning biking, almost finished. It looks wonderful. There's a small section up the Falls Bridge that's not paved yet, but basically from the MLK Bridge down here, down here, that PennDOT is working on, to widen and provide some work there. It'll eventually connect Falls Bridge to make that loop around Kelly Drive. MLK used to have a lot of tree uprooting, so people were avoiding that route. So a lot of folks were on the Kelly Drive side. And then the one big trail, which is not federally funded, most of those other projects did have some federal funding involvement, and someone from DVRPC managed them through the design development process, or is still managing them. This section of Delaware River Trail, which will be Washington Avenue up to Spring Garden Street, is also in construction. And, me being down from this area, I see how they're progressing that along as well. So, it's a little bit out, but, they're actively, continuing that construction there. The only other thing that I wanted to mention to the group is Sean McGill-Legendre shared with me that next week at the board, there'll be 10 projects totaling about $1.7 million going to the board for the Regional Trails program funding, which is funded through the William Penn program. And additionally, Sean shared that staff, including myself, has worked with our partners to identify and help develop some of the earmarks that legislators have been trying to, push with everything going on with Biden's new transportation bill. So that's kind of where we stand from the broad region. I'd like to, again, thank Tim for allowing me to speak today with, Roy and Fran, and also, thank the county planners that I've worked with and engineers that I've worked with so far to start developing the TA set aside potential program applications. So this is a map that DVRPC houses, and it's on the Circuit Trails website. So it's both in New Jersey and PA. As you can kind of see, it's kind of our highway network throughout our region. We do have some crossovers into other districts and, connections we're trying to make. I think a project Fran and the resurfacing program has worked on that I talked to Sean McGill-Legendre about, actually down in, I think it's Marcus Hook, actually working with DelDOT. We've provided, or looking at some connections to provide and extend our bike facilities, on-road bike lanes over to Delaware. So, again, we're trying to do it across counties. We're trying to do it across states. We just recently did the Ben Franklin Bridge, so that used to be steps. You had to carry your bike down. Now you can fully go down it with the ramp and go into Camden. So, definitely some good connections that are happening and are planned currently.
Yeah, and so what I think is really important for people to see as we talk about this and with the Circuit Trail projects is that connectivity across the counties, that somebody could eventually start. I mean, I know the conversations that we have here in Chester County with the Chester Valley Trail West, with that future completion, what that will look like for being able to move people all the way through the county into Philadelphia. And now, as you look at that map, you're beginning to see what I'll call loops occurring. So people could ride out and around, which are really important. It's not one direction. There's multi directions that people can travel. Thank you so much, Joe, Fran, and Roy. I do see that we have a couple of questions that are in the chat section. Let me pull up the chat here. I'm going to scroll to the top. I know that Roy, you've actually have answered some of them. Let's see. Let me go back here. I know the first one came out. This was towards you, Roy. It talked about e-scooters and the introduction of e-scooters. Has the PUC approved the operation of e-scooters statewide?
So the short answer is that's a legislative fix in Title 75 of the Vehicle Code. Because the way the Vehicle Code is written, when you get a new device that might be used on the roadway, we try to fit it into one of the existing definitions. And an e-scooter doesn't fit into anything except motor vehicle. And a motor vehicle in Pennsylvania is required to have a VIN number, an inspection, a registration, and insurance. There are no VIN numbers on e-scooters. They're not likely to have turn signals or lights or any of the other things we associate with a car. So they need to be put into the vehicle code with a specific definition that accounts for them. And we've got that definition. It's been hanging up in the legislature mostly because of issues with the scooter share. Many of you may have heard in the initial venture capital rush to get e-scooters out on the streets, they were depositing them on the streets of cities without asking permission, without getting any kind of agreement, and kind of moving fast and breaking things, as they like to say in that universe. That's not going to work in Pennsylvania. We need to have a little more regulation than that. So one of the things that the representatives are concerned about is the local governments have enough say to work with the scooter companies and hold their feet to the fire for agreements. And in particular, they were interested in requiring that the companies provide insurance in case of a crash with a pedestrian or a motor vehicle. Doesn't happen very often, but it was a concern. Scooter companies were not excited about that. And so the bill has been sitting for the time being. I haven't seen one introduced for this session, but I expect there will continue to be efforts to get them legalized in Pennsylvania. In some other national level conferences, Lime and Bird particularly have mentioned Philadelphia as a prime target for their operations. They just can't get in the door yet. So they're not legal on public roads or sidewalks at this point.
Great, thank you. I know it's posted in the chat, but Roy, where can I find the active transportation plan? Where's that housed?
I wish we had a short URL. Are we allowed to create those? But it's, if you type in Google Ride a Bike PA, that'll pull you to our website. Under bicycle, Ride a Bike is what it's called, and it has the active transportation in a column on the right-hand side. There's a lot of good resources there. We also have, under Travel in PA, a section on health and transportation as well as walking. So we've got a lot of links to federal highway documents, AASHTO documents, and internal PennDOT documents. It's a very rich resource if you want to take a gander at it.
Great, thank you. Fran, this one's for you. If a municipality wants to have a conversation with PennDOT about bike routes on state roads in their community, whom should they contact to start the conversation? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is for roads PennDOT is paving this and next year. Is there a way to find out what evaluation, if any, regarding bike routes was completed?
Basically, what I will say, it's a very easy answer. They may contact me, and I can get them all of that information. As far as accessing the roads that we've done or are under consideration between the database that I showed you and DVRPC's database, I can easily get them that information. Another resource, they can work with their community or their county planners who also have access to the DVRPC web database, and that way the information is available from two different directions.
And Fran, here's another one. What is the ADT threshold limit for Sharrow installations?
You're putting me on the spot. You're putting me on the spot here. I think, what is it, Roy? It's like 8,000, I think, somewhere around there.
The Federal Highways guideline for separated bike facilities has a chart, which I pulled up figuring someone would ask. It's 3,000 ADT is for shared lanes or bike boulevards, and then bike lanes or shared lanes acceptable runs up to 5,000. But we're also looking at posted speed, so somewhere below 35 miles an hour.
Thanks for the save, Roy.
That's why it's a team effort. How are posted versus operational speeds considered when routes for adding bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, or marking shared lanes?
I will just say that operating speeds versus posted speeds is something that is kind of ingrained in PennDOT's traffic engineering culture. We take a look at that sort of thing for a variety of reasons, not just for bike lanes. So it's something that's always kind of in the back of our minds. It's kind of like an organic thing when you're a PennDOT engineer to understand and know that stuff, and also listen to the municipalities, listen to the locals, find out what their experiences are. We have forces out in our own forces out in the counties and in these municipalities. So, me just sitting in my office in King of Prussia, or my living room, as it has been for the last year, I can learn from those people who are actually on the ground in these areas. And we always take that into consideration. So I hope that answers the question.
Does PennDOT use data besides vehicle volume to determine provisions of a bike facility?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I think that was from Kim. I tried to answer, and I think I accidentally sent it to one of the participants instead of everybody. While ADT is a common driver, we do look, as Roy said, at speed limits. When we start to really drill down, say we have a borderline facility, now we've looked at the speed limits, we looked at the ADT, we looked at the physical feasibility, that sort of thing. We may drill down further and now start looking at the accident history. If we're kind of like on the fence, should we do a Sharrow? Should we do a bike lane? Should we do a buffered bike lane? That sort of thing. And even higher ADT thresholds. So that's when we would drill down even further and take a look at that information.
I do have a note in here from John Boyle, an update on Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, member designated projects, and House Appropriation Committee community projects. Those requests can be seen at the Bicycle Coalition's website. Take action, ask your member of Congress. So there's additional information that is there. We've talked about the maps. The answer is that yes, this presentation is being recorded, and we will be posting it later next week. If anybody doesn't else have another question, I don't see something posted here very shortly. What I'll do is kind of wrap things up here because we've approached that magical hour. I want to thank all of our speakers, Roy, Fran, and Joe, for being with us today. To give a shout out to two organizations with some upcoming events that kind of fall in this line. Tomorrow morning, April 17th, our sister agencies, the TMACC and Partnership TMA, at 10 a.m. is hosting a program on bicycling. So if you'd like to sign up for that, go to their websites and register, be a part of that. And then on April 29th, Chester County Planning Commission from 6:30 to 8 p.m. will be hosting their Open Space Summit. So you would want to join on and see that. And I do not see any additional questions on it. So again, thank you everyone for being with us. I really appreciate the updates. This part of our planning is really important as we look at mobility options for everybody. So everyone keep trails and bike lanes in your thoughts when you're planning out routes in your communities. So with that, thank you everyone. Be well and be safe.